All right, we're up. Welcome to the SoundGirls Living History Project. And today we have the wonderful, wonderful LENISE BENT. It's such an honor to see you here, LENISE. And I'm so happy to do this interview on behalf of SoundGirls. My name is Aline Bruijns from the Netherlands, and it's a complete honor. So LENISE, you have a beautiful legacy already
Oh,
because
thank you.
you keep going on, which is wonderful, which we love. Don't stop.
That's
But you
the
have
living part. I'm still alive.
exactly. Don't stop. But you have such a beautiful legacy already within music and also audio post production. Can you tell us how you got started?
Certainly. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm
Thanks.
quite honored. I'm very proud to be a sound girl and have for many years. And I encourage all of you out there to become sound girls, men and women. You
Exactly,
can, yeah,
exactly. We're all
everybody can
sound
be a
girls.
sound girl.
Exactly.
Yes. So, and so good to see you again, Aline. You know,
Yeah, it's nice. We met already in Amsterdam
yes,
last
a
year.
year
The World
ago, and that
Trade.
was just so much fun. And so, what a
Yeah.
treat to be interviewed by you. This means a lot.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's so nice to hear.
Yes, no, it's true. So, really been looking forward to this. So,
Nice.
I started out, well, I grew up in Los Angeles, which is not far from Hollywood. So, I had, uh, could be a bit of an advantage in that respect.
Mhm.
My family was musical. They weren't professional, but loved music, and we played music a lot. My brothers and I were in youth orchestra growing up. I played the flute
Yeah.
and also studied piano. And then we had an advantage here because of being near Hollywood, that uh, I went to work at the very tender age of 8 years old. I started working in the Screen Children's Guild, which was uh, a child labor. Actually, it was something you could do here. My parents signed my younger brother and I up for the Screen Children's Guild, so we could have a little extra money. That we had 6 kids in the family, and you know, um, this really would help out. So um, my brother Richard and I were in the Screen Children's Guild, which was an organization that they would cue the children. They would bring in children for backgrounds, or occasionally there's a speaking part or whatever. We weren't official actors, but a lot of official actors came out of that.
Cool.
We didn't stick to it that long, but
Yeah.
we did it for about 3 or 4 years. And what happened with that was being exposed to television and film production right there on the set, and I was absolutely hooked, and um, loved film and loved TV, but it kind of ruined how you watch TV. None of our little
Oh
friends
yeah.
watched TV or movies with us because we'd always say, "Oh, look, her purse is on her other shoulder in this scene," or we would notice all these sort of things, and so we weren't any fun to watch TV or films with. And
Nobody would
I'm
take you to the cinemas.
yeah, I'm still kind of like that. If
Yeah.
a show isn't really well written, or the film isn't really well written, or it's not a strong storyline or whatever, I'll
Yeah.
just start going to work and looking around for and hearing sound effects and doing things
Oh
like
yeah.
that, and it's not so much fun for others.
I mean, you
Uh,
create an extra sense to it, of course, during that
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's there aren't a lot of secrets about it
No.
anymore. But anyway, so my brother and I started out in that, and also my oldest brother worked at an electronics store when he was 16, and he would bring home amplifiers and pieces of radio gear and whatever to work on. And I was about 3 at that point, and one of my earliest memories, I was just so fascinated with all this equipment and gear, and the smell of vacuum tubes, but um, valves, as you call them in England.
Yeah.
But when he would fire up one of these to work on it, just that smell, even to this day, is one of my most favorite and comforting smells
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
my early days. And so I was exposed to that that early on, as well as always being totally into music, and having older brothers and sisters. I was the youngest. Um, I heard a lot of rock and roll and a lot of music um, that my other little friends who didn't have older brothers and sisters didn't hear. They were still playing their little children's records,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
I was hearing other something else, and very much into it, even
Yeah.
before I went to school. So um, all of these things, elements, kind of came together at a certain point when I was in high school. Um, I was studying film in high school. We were able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
And I had a boyfriend who was a singer in a band. Lots of people had bands back then. This was in the mid, late 60s. And uh, he had a guitar player who became an engineer, sound engineer for a very famous at the time, and iconic to this day, producer, songwriter, performer named Leon Russell.
Yeah.
He was a member of the Wrecking Crew as well, which is the famous Hollywood session players who played on all the great records with the Beach Boys and Mamas and the Papas and Sonny and Cher and
Wow.
film scores and all of that. Well, he was one of the keyboard players of the Wrecking Crew as well, but very popular at that time, and I was a huge fan. And I guess I was, uh, yeah, I was in either in my last year of high school or first year of college.
Yeah.
I went to college and high school at the same time, so they kind of
Oh yeah,
blend.
it mangled a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I got fed up with high school, so they,
So move on.
so they compromised and put me in college in the afternoons if I promised to go to high school in the morning.
Oh wow.
So I did go up sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, something important I want to share with people too. It's not always about being a good student to
No,
succeed. Sometimes that system doesn't work for all of us.
true.
So you have to find what does. And actually, going to college in the afternoon helped tremendously, um, because high school for me just wasn't my happy place at all. It didn't challenge me, uh,
Hmm.
um, the requirements and all of that. So it's okay, is what I'm telling people. It's not for everyone. And
No,
so
true.
don't think there's anything wrong with you
Yeah.
because it doesn't work out.
And
And
yeah, exactly. And you don't fail if you move on
exactly.
from that. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Just because that's the system doesn't mean that's for everyone. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that was something I wanted to be able to be sure to share, which I haven't
Yeah.
shared in any other interview.
No, but that's also important. I think that's a real life lesson because people can get hung up on because it should be like that. It should go like
Yeah.
that. Like you
Well,
fail.
that's what they're told. And if you don't, if it doesn't work for you, then you think there's something wrong with you. And in actual fact, um, that's that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And um, so it's okay if that doesn't work out. There are other ways to succeed.
Yeah.
And having a vision and being driven is an important thing, and not letting a system hold you back or oppress you
Yeah.
um, isn't the way to go.
No. No,
No.
true. And but then you were also um how did your family cope with that? Because doing two studies is
Well,
quite a thing,
by
of
the
course.
time I came around, I have a sister who's 16 years older than I am. So, and so there's a big stretch in
Mhm.
between there. There's three sections of two kids each. So,
Yeah.
being the youngest, by the time I came around, and my father was, my parents were a little older than most of my friends' parents by
Mhm.
that point, and so actually, I didn't get a lot of attention, which was, I thought that was, kind of bad, sort of
Mhm.
at the time. I wanted more attention.
Yeah.
However, because they weren't helicopter parents or whatever, I was free to do a whole lot of stuff that they weren't really aware of,
Oh yeah.
um, which was the nice thing too.
Yeah.
I
Let
had a
you
lot
grow in
more
different.
freedom.
Yeah.
Uh, and so but I was trying to do the right thing, and
Yeah.
so I was in going to college, and during that time uh is when my boyfriend's guitar player Roger got this job as Leon Russell's recording engineer. And back in those days, very few people had home studios. They cost a lot of money and took up a lot of real estate, the big consoles and the big tape machines and all the
Oh yeah.
outboard gear and all of that. And you had to have a fair amount of money um, to be able to create that in your home. And it was typically uh, worth it just to book a studio,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
it was such a enormous commitment, both
Mhm.
financially and space wise.
Yeah.
And so this was a rare thing, and I had done a lot of movie things, and uh, was familiar with production sound and all of that, and studying film, and I was going in that direction, studying at USC, as well as uh, Cal State University Long Beach had a really good television and film and radio production program back then. So
Yeah.
I was going along those lines. And Roger said, "Wow, I got this job at Leon Russell's house." And I was an enormous fan and loved his music and had seen him perform many times, and,
Oh.
was just, you know,
You're blown
huge.
away, like
Yeah. And he goes,
ah.
"You should come over and see the studio." And I went, "Whoa." Sure. Um, I I was somewhat interested in seeing a recording studio, but of course I was much more interested in potentially meeting Leon Russell, and actually going to his house, and all of that you know, was
Wow.
pretty huge. So
Yeah.
that day after school, um, I drove out to Leon's house, which was no, it was in a suburb of Los Angeles called Encino, which
Mhm.
is in the San Fernando Valley, and it's a nice area. And so I drove over there, and um, rang the doorbell, and Leon actually answered his own doorbell, and I almost fainted. And
Completely
because I
shocked.
didn't expect that at all. Famous rich people have staff and things.
Yeah.
They have people who do that sort of thing for them. But Leon actually answered his own door, and I was totally blown away. And he said, with his Oklahoma drawl, he goes, "Oh, you must be Roger's friend. Come on in." And I oh, so I
Oh
walked
my
in,
God.
and but I hear this amazing music going on. to my right, and it's all of these voices. Uh, it's turned out to be 21 tracks of background vocals by Leon's wife, Mary McCrary.
Oh wow.
Um, at that time, I don't think they were married yet, but she was singing all of it was like angels were singing. It was just so beautiful. It was from a song called Hideaway from an album they were working on called Will o' the Wisp.
Oh, that's
And and if you want to ever hear the angels that I was listening to, it's about 2 minutes 40 seconds. It starts um, in that song, and you can just hear these voices, and they were playing them back to see how they were, because Leon had a Stevens 40 track tape machine, which was also quite unusual. Only three were made, from what I
oh wow.
understand, and Mr. Stevens had one, and Leon had one, and I don't know where the other one went,
Mm.
but so he could have 21 tracks of background vocals.
Oh wow.
And so I walked in to follow the voices, and I walk into what was supposed to be a dining room, but had been converted into a control room. And Roger was in there at the console, which I don't recall straight away what it was. It could have been an MCI or Sony or something. I don't know what it was.
No.
All I know is that I saw it, I heard the voices, I saw the speakers, I saw the outboard gear, I saw the tape machine, and I just felt like this was it. I had my epiphany, my aha moment, and I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest
Oh,
of my life. And I just said to Roger, "Show me how to work this." And the next day, I I dropped out of university, and I found a recording school, which was not easy back in the day. Nobody did that. You pretty much learned how to engineer
hmm
as at a studio at
hmm
that point by following somebody around, and
having a
starting from the
mentor.
bottom. Yeah, mentoring. And but there weren't a lot of schools that taught that sort of thing. But I found one, signed up, and then went home and told my parents what I'd done. And my father, who was a dean of an aerospace university, Northrop University, um, he wanted all his kids to go to college because he
Mhm.
didn't get to. Yet he was smart enough to actually become an instructor and an eventual dean of this university. And so it was very important that all his kids get a college
Yeah.
degree. And of course, here I'm dropping out of university to go to a tech school, which back then was kind of frowned upon by a lot of people. However, he got it. He understood.
Yeah.
And actually, the school that he was dean of was very much like a recording school, only it was to teach um, aerospace engineering and mechanics, and train people on how to um, build and maintain airplanes and jets and bombers and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very similar to what
Yeah.
I was going into, and so he understood, and he gave me his blessing, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
great because I was going
That's
to
really
do it
great.
anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, so it just worked out really well that he was supportive, and also I saved him a ton of money because recording schools were a lot cheaper than university too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but
And you made the right choice.
Well, for me it was, because there was no other way I knew how to learn how to do this,
Yeah.
because you didn't have programs like you have today,
No.
um,
No.
which just, that's good and bad in my
Yeah.
book a little bit. But so I signed up and I started this school, Sound Masters Recording School, um, which was upstairs in this building on Hollywood Boulevard, and it was just uh, like lecture hall, an
Hmm.
empty room, and there were 50 guys and me.
Oh
I'm the
yeah.
only girl, but I didn't care. I didn't even think about that. You know, I have three brothers, so you know, I've always been comfortable around guys, so
Yeah.
it's so that's really important too. You know,
Yeah.
just you know, I didn't. It never occurred to me that girls couldn't do this.
Yeah. I
It
think
never
that's
came up in
also,
my head.
of course, of course.
Even back then, even though you know, if there was a lot of bias towards certain things. Uh, when I was in the seventh grade, um, they had the people take these aptitude tests to see what you were good at,
Mm.
and I back then I was painting and drawing, and I wanted to be an artist, and I was more on the creative side, and music and all of these sort of things,
Yeah.
and my test came back saying that I would make a good engineer.
Oh wow.
And I was kind of horrified, and my friends and schoolmates made fun of me.
Oh
They
really?
laughed. Yeah,
Because of
like,
that.
ooh, you know what, ooh, what a dorky thing to do, or you know, and I was, yeah, they made fun of me
Oh wow.
because I um, could be an engineer. These days, I don't think that happens, and that certainly
Yeah,
better not happen. But it had an impact on me,
of course.
and you know, clearly that wasn't. Not only was that something girls didn't do, but I was weird because I could do that,
Yeah.
and I was embarrassed,
Mhm.
and that's wrong.
Of
That
course.
shouldn't have
Yeah.
happened. I wish
Of
that
course.
hadn't happened.
Yeah.
And I want to just make sure that people know that that doesn't have to happen, and it better not happen now. Dag nabbit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah.
them are fighting
No, but of
words.
course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah. So, uh, and it never occurred to me till later, because my siblings went into they all went to university, but they studied a variety of things. Like my sister was an artist, you know, got her degree in art, and my brother got his degree in psychology,
Mhm.
and another brother did, and my one of my brothers became a technical writer and a journalist,
Oh wow.
and then I did this in my so I dropped out of university and went to this school, and my oldest brother said, well, dad finally got his engineer.
Oh
And
wow. Yeah.
yeah, he
Yeah.
always wanted one of them to go into
To
that.
engineering.
Yeah, in fact, one of my brothers did go to Northrop University for a while for aerospace engineering,
Oh.
and
And how cool that his youngest daughter gets to be
yeah, it
an
never
engineer.
occurred to him that I would be the one,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
also not just an engineer, but within music, within film. I
Mhm.
mean, it's so
It all just came to,
total. It all
yeah,
comes
you
to
know,
it
all
comes to
those
the picture.
different things growing up that uh, appealed to me, um, that are supported a little more now. Like, I used to get upset at Christmas time that uh, my brothers would get when we were young, they would get models, or you know, they could build models, model cars and model airplanes,
Mm.
uh, model guns. They were always, you know, building things. The smell of glue and paint was
Yeah.
always around, which I really liked. Um,
Yeah.
um, and I wouldn't get those things. I
Mhm.
remember I got a doll for Christmas, which in this, and I just in this it buggy, and
Yeah.
I'm probably 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't know what I was supposed to, it didn't resonate with me. Where
Yeah.
my two older sisters had doll collections and, the doll clothes and play dolls and all of that. And I was just kind of, eh, I like to
Doesn't
draw.
work for me.
Didn't. I never,
No.
um, never had that desire
No.
to do that. And uh, I wanted to build models, and I
Yeah.
wanted to um, do more of the things that my brothers got to do. And as they got older, they got these things called uh, Heathkit was the company where you could build an amplifier or a preamplifier
Wow.
for a turntable or some piece of electronic equipment. And I was just like fascinated by that. And but that wasn't something a girl got, you
Yeah,
know
exactly.
and I was
Ye
much younger than they were too. So,
Yeah.
but when I was be playing my flute in orchestra, I started about
Yeah.
uh, 8 years old, and used to love to take it apart and put it back together, which horrified my mother.
Don't do that.
Like, what would happen if I didn't get it back right,
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
uh, just thinking about it now, I just what a fun, neat feeling it was to take all those things off
Yeah.
and then put them back together. And there's
To
all
see
these
how it
little
works and
yeah,
the technique
yeah,
behind it.
yeah, and I did it several times. It was just a fun thing to do for
Oh,
me.
wow.
And they finally started getting me some models to build and to keep me quiet. And old classic cars is
Yeah.
what I would build, and
Oh,
really
wow.
enjoyed that.
Oh, that's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so finally that was going along, but um and it had nothing to do with being a boy or a girl
No, it was
in
just
my
interest.
head. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was a bit of a tomboy, but I was also into fashion, and I
Yeah.
was into you know
Yeah.
music and
Yeah, exactly.
designing clothes. I used to design my own clothes and sew them starting at like 10 years old,
Oh,
and
wow.
love working the sewing machine. Would take that apart too.
Oh, cool. Cool.
And
Um,
so anyway, the reason I'm saying all these things was that these were uh, just parts of who I was growing up.
yeah.
That didn't necessarily go with the you know image of what young girls were supposed to be
Mhm.
interested in and doing, and back then it was still pretty separated you
Yeah.
know um so
You had some sort, yeah, a certain way you should go as
yeah, you were
yeah.
expected to do these things, and
Mhm.
um so I managed to fulfill my interests on my own terms a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but
Can you tell us something about your first tape recorder? I think I heard or read in an interview that when you were 8 years old, you got a
oh
tape
yeah,
recorder from your
yeah, see, exactly. Oh yeah. Um,
father.
I would go with my dad to there was a department store called Sears, and he would go to this store to buy the film for his camera. And
Yeah.
in the camera department, film department, in the glass case, they had just the cutest little reel-to-reel tape recorder. The reels were like 3.5 inches big, and um, those were popular for uh, spoken word and writing letters to send, uh, you know, before. there were
Before you
cassettes
got
and before
addicted,
anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I had an uncle. Like it goes back before then. What kind of triggered this? Um, I had a wonderful uncle who was a really good musician. He was Americana bluegrass. He played
Wow.
um, banjo and played traditional roots music on his Martin guitar,
Mm.
and he would come visit and uh, he would bring his reel-to-reel tape. He had a big reel-to-reel tape machine that he could do sound on sound with,
Oh wow.
and my mother and my aunt used to sing on the radio a little bit, and they always sang together, and so he would record them on that, and I was just fascinated with his tape machine, and I have his tape machine. He passed away several years
Oh,
ago, sadly, but uh I have that tape machine.
oh
And
wow.
yeah, and so I was fascinated with that. I would say by the I was like 4, 5 years old,
Oh wow.
and so that was the beginning of that. So when I was um, going to be 8 years old, when I was 7, I would see this little tape machine. I'd go with my dad to the store just so I could look at that tape machine. And I wanted that tape machine so bad I was sick. Like when you're little kids,
Yeah.
when you really want something really bad,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh
I,
yeah.
I
You get
just
lost.
I
You
was
get
just
lost.
obsessed with this thing.
Oh,
And thank goodness the birthday fairies or whatever for my 8th birthday, I got that tape machine.
oh,
And
how awesome.
my cousin and I we'd record uh, shows off the television, we'd do little plays, we'd sing songs, we did all sorts of stuff.
Oh,
Um, and
so
just,
good.
I had so much fun with it. And I have no idea what happened to it. I'm
It's too
like
bad.
dismayed. It
Oh,
occurred to me much later, whatever happened to that?
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would play with that up until I was like a, preteen, 12,
Yeah.
13 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
uh, that was really, important.
Yeah.
And I was going to hear a lot of live music early on
Yeah.
too. Um, Again, one of the joys of not having parents who were really paying a lot of attention to me. I could
Yeah.
go out and hear music with
Yeah.
friends. And we had some really good clubs not far. When I was like 15 or 16, one of my best friends, she and I really loved um, blues music and roots music, and there was a club called the Lighthouse not far
Mhm.
from us, and we could ride our bike there.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
Wednesday nights was ladies' night, and so we could get in for $1. And
Okay.
because they served food, we were allowed to go in, and we would hear like Mose Allison, who's a great um, jazz singer pianist. Had Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee,
Yeah.
and just we'd hear jazz, we'd hear all
What a
sorts of things, and then down the street, this was in by the beach in Hermosa Beach,
Mhm.
and then after the session of uh, first set at the lighthouse, we could ride our bikes down to Concerts by the Sea, which is on the pier, about a 10-minute bike ride. And I saw BB King, I saw Willie Bobo, I saw people like that there. And then we could ride our bikes back for the last set, like around 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And that's when the beatniks came out, who used to
Oh,
hang
yeah.
out at the beach back in the 50s and would go to those sort of beatnik type clubs and would hear jazz and beat music. And so we saw those people. And then I ride my bike home, and
Oh
they
wow.
didn't really know I
What an
wasn't
awesome
there.
time. What a great time. What a
Yeah,
great
so
way to learn also.
yeah, I
Learn
was
different kind of music, to see people perform.
yeah, I was passionate about that,
Mhm.
and thankfully I had a best friend who was just as passionate about it too. So, and she got a car when she was 16.
All
She was
right.
older than me, so we could actually drive up to the Sunset Strip, and we could
Mhm.
drive to concerts,
Oh,
and
that's
that
wonderful.
was very, very cool. So we saw some great shows back then. And so it was a combination. It was my passion for music, but also learning how to, my technical engineering aptitude.
Yeah.
Uh, so I signed up for the class, and um, 50 guys and me, and they're just talking about audio.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what they're talking about. Amplitude, velocity, Doppler effect,
Yeah. Mhm.
complex waveforms, compression, limiting. Um, it sounded like Chinese to me.
Yeah.
And they weren't demonstrating it. And the instructor was just talking about it.
Right.
And I'm in this room full of guys that are going, yeah, yeah, and they're already playing guitars and roadies and working with different people.
Oh yeah.
And I
You're like
panicked.
blank face. Ah.
I just panicked, and
Yeah.
I said, "Oh no, I've made a terrible mistake here. I've dropped out of college,
Mm.
and I've signed up for this, and I haven't a clue what I'm getting into here."
Yeah.
And literally panicked. And after the class, I got on a payphone and called Roger over at Leon's,
Yeah.
and was, "Oh no, I don't know, I just started class and they were talking about this and this, and I've done the wrong thing, I don't know what to do, blah blah." And he goes, "Come over."
Yeah.
So the next day I went over because I was no longer in university, which I went to Tuesdays and Thursdays because I worked
Mhm.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And Roger sat me down, and he showed me a LA2A compressor, and he said, "This is a compressor, and this is what it does, and this is what it sounds like."
Yeah.
And he played some music, and he ran it through the compressor, and so I got to hear what that was doing, and this is limiting, and this is what a limiter does, and this is what an equalizer does, and you get to play with this. So
Mm.
so
Wow.
I
That's
was
the best
very
way to
pleasant.
learn.
Yes. So what happened then? From then on, I went to the recording school on Monday and Wednesday nights, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays I would go to Leon's house, and Roger would let me practice, or teach me um, what uh, what I'd learned in class the night before. I actually got to put it to the test,
Yeah.
and so that was an enormous help, obviously. And
Mhm.
I just have to say a little bit about Roger. Roger was uh, about 18 at the time, and I guess we're about the same age. And he was working on his little invention while he was doing this. That's what he calls it, his little invention. But his name
Mhm.
was Roger Lynn, and he built the Lindrum.
Oh yeah.
He
Yeah.
invented the first drum sampling machine,
Oh, awesome.
which changed recording. It was patented and all of that before he was 21.
Oh wow. That's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
And
Yeah.
so this is who taught me,
Yeah.
as well as the school.
Learning
And
from the best. Yeah.
yes, and and my boyfriend's band,
Yeah.
he was the guitar player in my boyfriend's band. Roger will say, no, Robert Flashman was my boyfriend, who went on to be the lead singer of Journey,
Oh yeah.
or
Mm.
before Steve Perry, and wrote several of their songs, and had a so went on his own, and
Yeah.
still making music and art and all of that. We're still good friends, but
Oh, good.
many, many years ago. Anyway, so I could practice with his band too,
Mhm.
and that helped a lot. Also, another cool thing about this school was that because back then they didn't have brick and mortar schools that had recording studios built for the school for the students to learn or anything like that. We
Mhm.
didn't, this school didn't have anything like that. So our labs were in actual studios.
Oh,
And
wow.
being in Hollywood, I'd have 3 weeks of lecture and then 3 weeks of lab in a studio, and 3 weeks of lecture and 3 weeks of lab. Right? And it went on for like 9 months. But the labs were at like Capitol
Oh, wow.
and Conway.
Yeah.
Those were our two labs
Awesome. Yeah.
places. So I got to actually learn in a real live, you know,
Oh, yeah.
studio, not one built for a school.
Yeah.
And that I think was a really good thing too.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
So I had there were a lot of, the universe was very supportive of me doing this, apparently. And because I was just, once I had that epiphany, there was no stopping me.
No.
Um, because, and this is what I like to tell my students, or anybody, is that I didn't need anybody to tell me no. I needed them to tell me how.
Yeah.
And that's just how I felt. And if somebody would come up with, well, there aren't enough jobs and girls don't do this, or, something stupid like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody was doing this. This is how I felt. Somebody does this. Somebody makes records. Before that, I didn't know people made, I didn't know the process. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't know, but I didn't. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
Hadn't thought about it
No.
until it was presented to me, and then I, that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, people just kind of got out of my way. And
Yes, they should.
yeah, well, well, I guess I was kind of insufferable in that respect. Every chance I had to go to a recording studio, I did. Every chance, and
Yeah.
I
But that
graduated
probably
from.
got noticed as well, just you being eager to learn. I mean, that's also something which goes on until far, far in the future. If you are eager to learn, doors will open.
Oh
If
yeah,
nice
absolutely.
personality, doors will open. If you want to fight for it, doors will open.
hmm Yeah, when people know you're sincere and mean it, and not just messing around, um,
Yeah.
then things happen for you.
Of course.
Um, and then you have to be accountable.
Yeah,
So make
exactly.
sure
Oh yeah.
make
Yeah.
sure you've got that thing that you get yourself into.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can do that thing,
Yeah.
um, and because now you're going to be expected to.
Do so. Yeah.
Yes, right.
You're gonna
So
be holding accountable.
yeah, you have to be accountable, and
Yeah.
and um,
Yeah.
and it's a little different as people find out. Going to school is great training, but the most important thing I learned from that was how much I didn't know once I got my first job,
Oh yeah.
um, at the Village uh, Studios. Back then, it was called the Village Recorders. So after I graduated, I applied to two places,
Yeah.
and Wally Hyder's was the studio, the first one I interviewed at, and then the Village Studios.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so
Let
I
me
got the
share.
job as an assistant at the Village. And what was very, very cool about that, there you go. There it
There
is,
it is.
1616 Butler Avenue. I,
So cool.
yeah, my very formative years for me spent there. and uh, they uh, had hired one other girl assistant, and the day I was hired along with another girl assistant, and then 2 months later, another one was hired. So
Oh,
there were 4 women assistants there. There were a total of 6 assistants, so 2 guys and 4 girls. And one of the guys I was in my class at Sound Masters, Hernan Rojas, who ended up working with um, Fleetwood Mac a lot, but
oh,
he got a job there too. So that
oh,
was
that's so
fun
good.
having him there.
Yeah.
He's from Chile and he's back in Chile, but we're still in contact. And
Oh,
wonderful
that's so
guy.
nice.
So
And
yeah,
this
there
was
were
in
4
the
women there, and that had never happened before, or I don't know if it's happened since. The
oh,
village has always been very supportive of women, and a lot of other studios are too.
yeah.
Um, I just know that
Especially that
that
in that
was,
time was quite
yeah,
unique, I think. Yeah, because this was in the 1976.
it was 76. I was there from 76 through 79.
Wow,
And but
so
I
cool.
the reason I wanted to get a job there, my goal as an engineer was um, I wanted to work with the best musicians in the best studio with the best producers and the best engineers on the best music.
Wow. Yeah.
That, and a lot of people don't think like that, or that wasn't a priority for them, so they
Mhm.
wanted to engineer sooner or
Oh yeah.
whatever. And I knew that by assisting at a big studio like that, I probably wouldn't be engineering as fast as some of my colleagues
Hmm.
who weren't working at those places. They were probably getting jobs, uh, at a console and engineering before
Yeah.
that, but um, maybe not at the level that I was aspiring to.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
it's a wonderful, wonderful place also. I mean,
yes,
it's
yeah,
just gorgeous.
Studio D, that was being built while I was there. When I first started, that didn't exist.
Oh
That
wow.
wasn't built yet, but
Wow.
they've started in on that while I
Oh,
was
that's so
there,
cool.
and I did get to work there, and I've gotten to work there a few times since too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yes,
That's so cool.
yes,
I
I'm
also have
very
a
happy.
control room from Studio D, which also,
Yes, yep. And see, look at on the side there. There's a little BBC Neve sidecar. Those are quite
yeah.
wonderful.
Oh
On
wow.
the far right in this photo, those when I did live sound, I did one gig of live sound. Well, with this one artist, I for a couple years, I was his personal um, sound person, and he was a very eclectic musician named Sandy Bull, Bull, and he would have all of these midied instruments on stage and would play along. And he, uh, back in the '60s, he was very popular in the avant-garde world and was friends with, you know, John Lennon and all sorts of uh, jazz people, but he had his own notoriety in
Yeah.
kind of like the folk jazz era.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know who he was, but somebody turned me on to him the um, early '90s, I think it was, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. And he needed somebody to be his live sound person, and uh, it turns out that I would be on stage with him, and that Neve sidecar, that BBC Neve sidecar, that was the instrument I played.
Oh wow.
So he would be a solo artist with all of these MIDI instruments, and he would play the sarod and the oud and the banjo and you know, a Stratocaster and an acoustic guitar. He'd play all these stringed instruments, and with these MIDI synthesizers that I would have to set up whatever our gig was with. I had a roadie with
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and but we'd have to haul that BBC um, sidecar, that Neve console, which is,
Oh,
if
wow.
you can find one now, you're lucky.
Yeah.
They
Can
are
imagine.
beloved, and they are expensive, and they're really heavy.
Oh yeah.
And we'd have to take all the modules out of it, and whatever city we went to, um, I would look and find two guys on a corner and have them haul it out of the truck and carry
Yeah.
it up the stairs or wherever it had to be.
Yeah.
And then when we would leave, I'd have to find somebody to do that.
To help
So
again. Oh yeah.
yeah, but that was when I saw that. I'm sorry, I kind of, got off
No, no, no.
track
I
here.
love those stories. I just love them. I mean, this is something that you don't hear every day, so I love it.
Yeah, it was great to do live sound. There was no automation, and there was no uh, uh, um
You have to
what
memorize
I
what you
had
had to
the
do.
for each song I had a 5x7 card, like in a notebook thing with rings on it, and um whatever song he Sandy decided he wanted to play, because he would kind of have a set list, but if he didn't feel like playing it,
Oh
he
my
didn't.
gosh.
He played whatever he felt like playing.
Oh
And if
wow.
other people, depending on the city, um, it was kind of artsy fartsy. So we'd be in Santa Fe, and we'd be in up in Berkeley, and we'd be in Santa Barbara, and we'd play in museums and colleges, and uh, uh, yeah, San Francisco. We played a lot.
Yeah.
And, so we were driving all over, and uh, so different people. He played the Troubadour here in
Oh
LA,
yeah.
which is
Hmm.
very popular, and different people got up and played with him. Who
Yeah.
He had a huge following. I had no idea. Um, Very underground following, and so he would play, and I would be on the side on stage with him, and my roadie would be in the back, and we had our little hand signals: bring up the bass, bring down the, and so I would just, you know adjust the levels and mix, and he would let me know what the balance was like, because
Oh
every
wow.
hall is different.
Yeah,
So whatever it
definitely.
was the night before had nothing to do with how it was going to be tonight, as everybody
Oh
finds
wow.
out. And it was a real performance
Yeah.
for me, as well as for Sandy. And uh, so I did that for a couple years until it was like, well, I've done this. I don't need
Yeah.
Now I
Oh,
know what this
wow.
is like. And
Oh,
I don't need to
wow.
do this anymore.
Oh, but I can imagine. I mean, that's also really fun to do, and
It
also
it was.
probably really hectic. I mean, you have to switch really easily if it's a different song, or you have to memorize how which
Yeah.
card to use, and oh wow.
Yeah. Well, and also you learn a lot about being on the road, and
Yeah.
what being with
Yeah.
somebody is. And here's a very, very important piece of information all people going on the road should know. Uh, when you get paid at the end of the night, count the money in front of the person that gave you the money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not uh, bad form. It's absolutely the appropriate thing to do, because um, one of those nights I got paid and went back to my hotel room and counted, and I was a couple $100 short.
Oh no.
And I went back to the person who paid me, and I said, I got shorted here. And he goes, well, that's your word against mine, isn't it?
Oh wow. Yep, that's how it goes.
So always, always, when somebody pays you, especially cash,
Yeah.
count it right there in front of them, and that's just good form for both of you. So
Yeah.
sharing that,
Exactly.
those
Yeah.
are, there's a lot of stuff you learn on the road, and it's not
Yeah.
all technical.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It is. It is. You
Yeah.
fall and get up, and then it's like, okay, this is one new
Hmm.
thing we learned for the
Yeah.
rest.
Yes. What is the
Not
lesson
do that
here?
anymore. Oh wow. So at the
Yeah.
village, in which studio did you record? Where did you learn the most? In which studio from the village?
It's interesting. I started out mostly working in Studio B,
Yeah.
which was in those days pretty much a mirror of Studio A.
Okay.
Um, and so in the back of the studio was Studio A. So you the actual, yeah, okay, that's A.
Yeah.
And see the control room there well,
Mhm.
and see let me see, where was it, um to just to the left, see where the wood area is there, not the curtains. There was a window there, and then
Okay.
there was an identical space as what we're looking at of the studio here, and the control room for B
Hmm.
was on the near side
Yeah.
of the room. So the control room there in the back of Studio A, we're looking at it at the back. Well, when you walked into the front door of the village to go to Studio A, you went straight and walked down this hallway all the way to the end. Well, to go to the control room Studio B, you turned left, and it was right there. Now, if you go into the village, there's a hallway, and it goes into the lobby of and heads towards um, the stairway, and then heads towards Studio D.
Oh yeah.
Um, but when I was there, there were only three studios: A, B, and upstairs Studio C, which Robbie Robertson has four-walled for many years. Um, but at the time, that was a smaller little studio with a quad 8 board in it. But so they were pretty much identical, and the point of that was if they wanted a larger session, maybe even a scoring date, they could they could open up the windows, or um, the, they could use both rooms for each control room, depending on where the session was being held, if they wanted.
What?
I never saw that happen.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Yeah, that's too bad.
where they, yeah, I know where they, but that was the concept of building the rooms the way they were, and so the control rooms were pretty much the same, had a lot of the same equipment in it, and the tape machines would go from room to room depending on um, what the engineer or the needs were for the session.
Yeah.
Um, so I started out in Studio B a lot, and I was working with a group called the Band.
Hmm.
Um, they had done the Last Waltz concert. That was their final farewell concert, and they had done some studio recording. That if you see the movie The Last Waltz, Scorsese's movie, um, you'll see some studio sessions and songs, and so they were recording and working on those and mixing those in Studio B. So I worked on that, and I worked with several artists, mostly in Studio B, and uh, then when Steely Dan was coming in, and
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of fought for that. And
Oh yeah, it's
um,
so gorgeous. I have to show you something because yay,
oh, there it is.
there it is. And what was so cool, I have a screenshot of it, but what I was so happy that I can share, let me look for it in between. Where is it? Let me see. Um, Let me quickly find it because I have your name in the
Yay.
LP. Here it is.
Yep. Yeah, I was the main one. Ken Klinger, I can tell you who these people were. Ken Klinger was a maintenance guy at the village. Um, Ron Pangalaman was the band's personal uh, assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda Tyler uh, and Ed Rack and Joe Bellamy, they some of this was done at a studio. There was a little bit of it done at a studio called Amigo, which is now called Boulevard. Not much of it was in, and some of it was done in New York at A&R Studios.
Okay.
It should say where it is. A&R Studios, New York. Okay, Village Recorders, West LA, Producers Workshop. Some was in Warner Brothers, some was
So it was pretty
ABC, some of it
scattered
was done on
also.
at ABC, but um, the big majority of the recording, mostly the overdubs, because the
Mhm.
guys lived in LA
Yeah.
and they lived in Malibu, so the the vocals and a lot of background vocals and guitars and most of the stuff was done at the village and including some of the tracking. Now um, uh, we did do one mix off of this of Peg, and but Al Schmidt will say no, he mixed Peg at in New York. So
Mhm.
um, I wasn't aware of that till just recently. I thought
Oh,
that
really?
the mix that we did was the one that went to the record, and in actual fact, um, neither one of us knows.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Which one got on?
yeah, I don't
Oh,
know which
wow.
one did. I mean, whatever one did, but I always thought it was the one we did because they were under such, oh, they were way over budget and had gone way too long and all of that, and um, we had to replace for months on this one song, Peg.
Yeah.
There had been a Lyricon solo. Lyricon is like an electric, a synthesized
Hmm.
um, woodwind instrument that Tom Scott had performed. And at the last minute, Warner Brothers said, and we want a guitar part on that, which the band wasn't really excited about, but they conceded. And so they did 6, 7, maybe 8 different guitar players until they ran out of people to use.
Oh,
And
wow.
Roger suggested, um, oh God, Jay Graydon, who did the solo on it. And I have to say, um, they didn't like the solo. They didn't like it. They didn't like having to do it anyway.
Mhm.
So I felt bad for anybody who came in there because they didn't like it. And back in those days, it was to tape. So
Mhm.
a lot of them, got erased. I
Yeah.
don't know if there are any of the other ones that are still on it. There's a documentary on the recording of Asia, and
Oh, really?
my memory of some of those things is different. I'm not on that thing. I'm not on the documentary, and but I certainly have very distinct memories of
Yeah.
what went down there on a
Yeah.
lot of cases. And However, that solo is iconic and works perfectly and is like nothing anybody had ever done, um and it worked out. But
Yeah.
they were so behind schedule that we had to mix Peg and worked way until I think the sun was coming up by the time we
Wow.
finished,
Mm,
um, which was not how they worked at all.
no.
And uh, so I just assumed that was the mix that went to the record. Now it just came up, like I said, that Al
Yeah.
Schmidt had said, "No, I mixed that," and I went, "Oh,
Okay.
well,
Oh,
okay, yeah."
whatever you say.
Yeah, and sadly Roger Nichols isn't here and to clarify anything. And I their producer is still around, so we could ask him. But
Yeah.
um, uh,
To clarify
I
it.
yeah, I just
Which
haven't.
mix is on it.
Yeah, because I kind of forgot about it. But
Yeah.
uh, anyway,
How was it to work with Roger Nichols?
he was fantastic. Told the corniest jokes, but that's not unusual for technical types. I've
Yeah.
learned. Uh, However, he was so supportive of me, and because he could tell I was, totally into it, and very there. Uh, he was so brilliant, yet he was very passionate about so many different things.
Hmm.
And whether it was sound engineering or scuba diving or racing his cars, or he had a lot of the hobbies that he did. I guess he surfed as well,
Wow.
different things, but he was just passionate. He lived out in Malibu and he was like the ultimate California guy,
Yeah.
but brilliant. And he had been uh, uh, he'd been a nuclear physicist down in San Onofre for a while. I mean, that's how smart he was, even
Oh,
at
wow.
this young age. And he wanted to make records that didn't have clicks and pops and things in them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he went to high school and hung out with Frank Zappa.
Oh, wow.
And I can't
You
imagine two
can't beat
different
that.
people. When I first heard that, I just went, "What?"
What?
I worked on some of Frank's records. Two records were done at the Village, and so I worked on both of those.
Wow.
Joe's Garage and Shake Your Booty. I wasn't the main assistant, but I would spell her because Frank worked from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and anyway, but back to Roger. In retrospect, thinking about how Frank was such a perfectionist, and Roger was, that I can see where in high school, after school, it would make sense for them
Yeah.
to kind of be together and hang out. They
Yeah.
were uh, both these brilliant, brilliant guys. But Roger, what was so cool about Roger was he was a great communicator. He would take any concept that a lot of people would try to dazzle you with their expertise and their vocabulary and their way of describing it to let you know how smart they were,
Hmm.
but not really communicate.
Yeah.
If I had a question or something I didn't understand, Roger would always tell me or anybody, and he would explain it in such a way that it was so easy to grasp
Hmm.
and you'd get it, because that was the important thing. It wasn't about how smart he was, it was him wanting you to understand.
Learn it.
And
Yeah.
he was such a good teacher. If you've seen any of his footage of any lectures or anything, you see and hear that. However, he was kind of strict. You didn't ask him anything twice, really.
Mhm. No, no, he
He'd say, "I already told you that,"
yeah,
or "Go look it up,"
yeah,
or "Read. Did you read the directions?
yeah.
Did you read the manual?
Yeah,
Go read the manual." You
yeah,
know, um,
yeah.
all
No,
stuff
but
that was
that's
right.
also good because that also keeps you don't take things for granted. You
No,
you
not at all.
really try to suck it up and learn from it. Yeah.
Well, and yet he was so generous with his knowledge and why he would do things a certain way, and he didn't complicate anything. Those records sound like they do because they're very simply
Hmm.
recorded, very directly recorded, um, and the minutia of good recording he really impressed upon me. Things like, using the shortest mic cable that works,
Mm.
um, and then not letting the mic cables touch,
Yeah.
and little things like that,
Yeah. To
were
get a
the
good
things that he
signal.
shared, because those are, you know, all those things add up
Yeah.
after a while.
Yeah.
And I still use a lot of the techniques that he shared with me,
Mm.
and it kind of made it difficult for me to engineer with other people who weren't so mindful,
Yeah.
and they'd say, "Ah, nobody's going to hear that. Ah, nobody's
Yeah.
going to hear that," and it'd be like, "I'm going to hear it.
Exactly.
I will
Because
always
you know
hear
the
that."
difference. You hear the
Yeah,
difference because you learned it, so you're
yeah,
focused on it.
and so yeah, Roger was fantastic, um and very kind and fun, um and yet he could tolerate Donald and Walter, and which was challenging. You know,
Mm.
they often recorded, note by note.
Oh wow.
Somebody, yeah, it was. There's a
Yeah.
reason those records sound like they do. But
Yeah. Yeah, but they sound amazing. They just sound amazing. It's the full spectrum. You can hear everything. Everything
yes.
has function. Everything is
Hmm.
thought about. It works. I love it. I grew up with them, so
Oh,
yeah,
good.
bring back good memories.
Oh, good. I got to work on Gaucho as well for a while, and I have to say I quit
Oh,
Gaucho because I had already done 10 and a half months
oh wow.
on Asia,
Yeah.
and I, even though I knew it would take me longer to, um, you know, get out on my own and be a head engineer,
Mm.
I was seeing my colleagues,
Yeah,
rising up
getting
and leaving the nest, and by that time that Gaucho came along, I kind of felt like I had gotten as much as I could get, and it was a dark time for them. It wasn't
mm.
a fun time for them. And another band was coming in that had been a big influence on me, um, called Supertramp.
Mhm.
And when I had heard, while I was in college, their record Crime of the Century, recorded by Ken Scott, I heard that record and I said out loud, without ever being in a recording studio, um, I want to make records that sound like this.
Oh yeah.
And
And you
little
did.
did I know that um, that would be my path. And they're just, the quality of that recording
Oh,
was
it's amazing.
in all, made me want to do that, be an
Yeah.
engineer. And then I found out they
And
were
then you got
coming
to work
in.
on this
Yep,
one. Yeah,
Breakfast in America.
there it is.
There
Oh,
it is. Yes. And
such a incredible album as well.
Yes, I'm very proud of that record, what I got to do. And um, uh, Pete Henderson was also very generous
Mhm.
um, with his expertise. He was the engineer producer. He co-produced with the band on the record. He had been like the protege of Jeff Emmerich and George Martin. He'd worked at Air Studios, so um, he was only 23, and I was the ripe old age of, I think, 26
Yeah.
when I was 25 or 26 when I started working on that. I was the older woman.
The older woman.
Yeah.
The badass woman.
Yeah, right. Assistant, but yeah, there it is. Yeah, and Jeff was again. He was the tech um, at the village,
Yeah.
and kept everything running, and so we worked together on that. Jeff's a wonderful guy as well, but
Wow.
sadly they weren't able to mix at the village, and so I wasn't allowed to be a part of the mix. I worked with him for 7.5 months
Oh,
on recording
that's
this, and
also a shame if you work so long, it becomes your baby, and then
yes,
you don't see what happens to it
it was
until it's
heartbreaking.
done, of course. But yeah.
And I
Oh,
would have had to, they tried to get me to come along to say, they needed me because I knew where everything was,
yeah.
but I would have lost my job at the village.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And going to Crystal, and Crystal, there's stories about how um, convoluted the mixing process was because of how it um, they had two 24-track tape machines, the band,
Mhm.
synced up, and it was a very complicated mixing
Yeah.
experience, and
Yeah.
um, so it was kind of really heartbreaking. I was just devastated when they found that they couldn't mix at the village. They weren't, what they were taking out in their mixes wasn't what they thought they were getting. And
Mm.
I don't know how they found Crystal. Um, but anyway, they had checked out a few studios. I
Mm.
did get to sing background vocals on one of the songs on that
Yeah.
record that I don't have credit for. And I also got to scream and yell and sing on another song, Nervous Wreck, and then on a song, Goodbye Stranger, I'm doing finger pop. So I'm actually
Oh, that's so
performing.
awesome. Oh, but that's so cool because then you add even more to the songs and
Hmm.
becomes even more a legacy.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was fun. That was fun. Um, Great
imagine.
guys. But when I heard that there was album was coming, that Supertramp was coming to the village, I went to the studio manager and I said, I need to work on this record. They're the reason, I wanted to be a sound engineer, and I explained, that when I heard Crime of the Century and what an influence it had on me, and I was familiar with all their music and more so than anybody else there, and the studio manager said, "Well, that's really great. That they, but they don't want a girl," and
Mm,
it just like. I had
what?
never heard that before. It
Oh
was
wow.
like that needle scratch that you hear
Yeah.
on records.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I was just stunned. I
Yeah.
I had never even
Yeah.
thought about that,
Mm,
and I was just kind of blown away. And I said, "Well, I can't change that. I can't do anything about me being a girl, but I know I'm the best one to work on this
yeah.
record."
Exactly.
and
They need me.
and so you know that has, I really want that to change, and don't, you know
Yeah.
please make that change if you can. And goes, well, sorry, there no, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
Oh, I was so upset. And I kept thinking this is just wrong. This is just wrong. I'm supposed to be the one who's working on this. And they weren't coming in for, a few weeks. And I kept writing them on it and the studio and then it came to the Friday night. They were supposed to start on a Sunday, and that Friday I just gave up, and I was
Mm.
so mad. And my boyfriend and I went to this sushi bar and drank a lot of mai tais, and
Yeah.
I got real drunk and was mad. And
Yeah.
he drove me home, and I, you know, passed out in my bed. And then at 10 o'clock, the phone rings, and I wake up from my drunken stupor, and the booking person from the village is on the phone, and she says, "Be in studio B at noon on Sunday. You're working with Supertramp." And so
What?
suddenly I'm sober,
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
sober. And I said, "What happened?"
Oh wow.
And she said, "Well, the one guy who was available didn't want to do it because it would be too long in the studio.
What?
So you're you're the one."
Oh wow.
Man, I was just so blown away. I
Yeah.
I really thought there wasn't a chance I would
Yeah.
be able to work on it. I just totally
But
given
that's
up.
also a tough start. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not an
so
easy thing to start in.
and they were not made aware that they were having a girl
Mhm.
there, and so I walked in at noon, and the person at the console, who was like their sixth member of the band, his name was Russell Pope, and he kind of oversaw things. He was kind of like their ears. He was just a magical member of the band who did the sound. He did live sound for them on the road,
Oh
all
wow.
sorts of things. But he's sitting at the console, and he just kind of turns his head and looks at me and goes, "May I help you?"
Mm.
And I said, "Well, actually, the question is, may I help you? I'm LENISE BENT, and I'm going to be assisting on your project." And big eyes,
Oh wow.
got the big eyes. But once he got over the shock of that, and I said, "But where would you like me to start? Where can I be of help?" And they were bringing in the drums, but they were moving in. They brought in, carpets and lamps and plants and
Oh wow.
paintings, and as well as instruments, and because they were going to be there for over 6 months.
Yeah.
So anyway, once they got over the shock, everything was fine. I think they
Wonderful.
would, in retrospect, they would probably been asked, "Do you mind if would you prefer a guy over a girl or whatever?" Because they could provide both, and they probably just said, "I don't know, a guy."
Yeah.
I
Because
don't
that's
think
what
they
they
really
knew.
had
Oh,
anything against women at
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't know that till I was, you know, when I was told that they didn't want a girl, I
Well,
couldn't
it
believe
breaks your
it.
heart, of course. I mean, you
Well, it
just,
broke my heart, but I couldn't understand
yeah,
what
why?
what this.
What's,
I've never understood why gender would have anything to do with somebody for the job that I needed to do, uh, that I needed to be good at.
exactly.
Being good at that job uh, was much more important than what my gender was. And in the past, that had never been an issue with any of us.
Hmm.
I'd been removed from one session because the producer, who was a loud, bombastic, very crass person, said to the studio manager he wanted a guy because I inhibited his barroom banter, quote unquote. And
Okay.
his ability to cuss in front of me, which is kind of stupid, but he wasn't a very nice person anyway, so I
Oh,
didn't mind. It wasn't a session that I wanted to be on. What I have learned and found in my experience is that the better the musicianship, the integrity of the recording session really did not care what my gender was. They needed me to do a job well.
exactly.
That's
That's
what
the
they
only thing
needed
that's
from me.
important. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what they needed.
yeah.
And if I could bring anything else, that was great. But uh, most people found that having a little estrogen mixed with all the testosterone was a nice balancing factor.
Hmm. Yeah.
I was early on, there was this wonderful bunch of people. Norman Whitfield was a fantastic producer who did a lot of R&B and soul music. And the first week I was there, I got to assist and sit in on the recording for the original movie Car Wash, which
Oh,
was
okay.
yeah, the original Car Wash with George Carlin, a bunch of people, and the band was the Undisputed Truth, and Rose Royce was the lead singer, which is Chaka Khan's. Um, well, Rose Royce was the name of the band, and Taka Boom was the lead singer, and that's Shaka Khan's sister. And uh, so they would always. There were a lot of black sessions and
Mhm.
R&B sessions, and I assisted on a lot of those. And they always had a bunch of people in the control room, and they were partying and having a good time, and the songs were lots of fun. And um, uh, on one occasion, um, the singer had to do the lead vocals, and it was kind of a love song or that sort of song. And they said, well, he goes, I need somebody to sing to. I need somebody to sing to. And so they said, well, send Lenise out there. And and so I went out there, and I sat there and in a chair, and he sang to me, and I did all of this, and I was producing his vocal.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that there are some people who um today would look at that and go, oh,
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
isn't that an awful thing to do? Heck no. Well, there was nothing wrong with that. Are you kidding? You do whatever it takes within
To get the performance
to
right.
get that baby bathed, as
Yeah.
they say, to get that performance. And
Yeah.
if it's to be somebody that somebody sings to, and everybody had a blast, they all had fun. I got into it. There was nothing degrading
No.
about it to me at all. I
No.
knew that it would make a positive difference in the vocal,
Yeah.
and it was just fun. And that's those sort of things that has to kind of be okay.
Yeah.
Um, he was not. There was nothing degrading about it.
No.
Even though some people today would say, "Oh,
Yeah.
how could
No,
you
but
do
I think
that?"
that also to get a performance, sometimes
Mhm.
you just need that little extra that someone can really perform and say, okay, I can give it my all.
Yeah, and that's, one of the advantages of being a girl in that situation. Right then,
Yeah.
um, that was a really good place for me to be.
Yeah, of course.
And um, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I can imagine this is a memory that everyone will have that memory listening to
Yeah,
that song.
yeah, yeah. And
Which is so cool.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And back then a lot of stuff went on in the studio and all, but I have to say that it was very, very rare that I had any issues, because I knew I had to present myself in a certain way to let them know that I meant what I was doing, and
Mhm.
all of us girls did.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there were some incidences where, well, I knew I could never sleep with anybody that I worked with. I would just never would do that,
Mhm.
because I knew that uh, that would just totally blow the integrity, and
Yeah.
that I needed to have as an engineer and someday producer.
Yeah.
Um, and so there were
Yeah.
some guys who just couldn't believe that I could resist them. And so they would say, "Oh, she's a dyke." They called me the dyke
Oh, yeah.
there for a while
Mhm.
because I wouldn't sleep with anybody. And it,
Yeah.
which was like, uh, no. And I had a boyfriend,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which was, I guess that didn't mean anything, but they
No.
could, um, not if this, again, these were isolated incidences. This
Mhm.
didn't come up, but this one particular group was in there, and um, not naming names, and they, because I could resist their, you know,
The charm.
advances.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And, there was, it never occurred to them that I didn't find them attractive at all. That never entered their minds.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
it
Oh,
was
yeah.
it was very easy to turn them down
Yeah.
for any reason in my book.
Oh, wow. Oh,
But
wow.
the so hey, get the dyke in here.
Yeah. Oh,
No,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah. And sometimes you just have to, okay,
yeah.
throw it off your shoulder and okay, yeah.
Hmm. There are
Whatever.
many, yeah, many things to learn. You got to know how to hang, and then you got to see where your lessons are,
Yeah.
and then also,
Also choose your battle. What are you gonna
yeah,
fight and what yeah.
and if every session was a learning experience, whether it was a new mic technique or a new, how to work a key pex and how to do phasing or something, or somebody treated you terribly and you just, you
Mm.
know I will, putting my own toolbox together, the thing that would go in the toolbox for that was, I will never treat anybody like I've been treated just now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. The
uh
hard way to learn stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there were those lessons
Yeah.
here and there.
Yeah.
Um, Not a lot, but they did exist once in a while, and those people, you couldn't take it personally, and
Mm.
you had to keep your eye on the prize. I knew
Yeah.
what the my long-term goal was, and I wouldn't let people like that get in the way.